I remember you when going and like meeting Ben for the first time, and you were running around. You were like 5 and I was like 10. I clearly didn't make much of an impression until I boasted about my street fighting techniques a few years later.
Yeah.
I'll tee you up for the first question, because it's a good story. What's your earliest memory of me?
My first memory of you was when we took the same bus to school. I was 5 years younger than you, and but we lived so close together that we took the same bus and same bus stop. And you were going out with a girl named
Café Harrington.
Yeah. And I was 7, you were maybe 12. I wasn't doing too bad. I was going out with her sister named Kamala.
You were going out with Kamala?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
Everyone knew it. And I was also at the time taking karate at Fred Villari's Studio of Self-Defense, and I had graduated to yellow belt. I was proud of it. I was wearing my gi to school.
Let's just stop and think about that for a second.
Yeah.
You wore your gi to school.
I take pride in what I do. That was an accomplishment. I was full gi, the big fold-over white thing with the yellow belt, boom. And because Kafi and Kamala were sisters, she was allowed to sit in the back of the bus that was mostly older kids, where you were the cooler and older kids. I was her beloved. I got to go sit with her. So there I was sitting in the back of the bus with you. And I had my gi, my yellow belt, my girlfriend. I was doing well. And then you said, so you take karate? I said, yeah. And you're like, you're a yellow belt, huh? I said, yeah, I'm a yellow belt. And you said, well, I'm a black belt in street fighting. You know, you were probably like 4 foot 5 inches tall at the time. And but I bought it. And for a long time in my head, you were just a vicious, not to be fucked with street fighter. Probably a few months into the school year, I figured out otherwise, but that's my earliest memory of you. What school were we at, Tobin?
Yeah, but remember it was CAPS, it was the Cambridge Alternative Public School.
They renovated it.
They turned to Graham Parks, named after Sandra Graham, who was a local city council member, and Rosa Parks. That was why I actually met Rosa Parks. I remember when she came to the school, when they officially changed the name, she came to the school, and I met her, and then met her again when we won the Oscar. She was, for some reason, at the Academy Awards, and I shook her hand, and she said, "Nice to meet you." And I said, "Actually, I had the opportunity to meet you once." And at that point, it had been, I guess, 15 years or something.
That's so funny, because one of my earliest memories of acting was performing for Rosa Parks.
Oh, really?
When she came to the school.
When she came that day, yeah.
Every class did something.
Yeah.
My bit was to run, I had a lion's mask, and run up to the front of the stage and go, "Rawr." And I ran up and my mask fell off in whatever was happening beforehand. And I thought, do I still roar? Will she know that I'm a lion? Will everyone know? Or do I have to put the mask on? But the mask wouldn't go back on. So I went through with it anyway. I roared, I went off stage, I'd committed to the performance. And then after, I'll never forget, because she came and she said, good. She came by everybody, but she was like, "Good job." And I was like, that's what you do. You got to see it through.
So she taught you what it was to be an actor.
Yeah.
That's awesome. At 6 years old, you learned everything you needed to know from Rosa Parks. That's amazing.
When we did Good Will Hunting to when we did Instigators, how many years is in between that?
26 years. 97, we shot Good Will Hunting.
97. Boston's changed a lot, and our relationship to Boston's probably changed a lot too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a totally different city. Good Will Hunting, I remember like Ethan and Mark, like some of our friends showed up, and we had that place in South Boston, and you and Ben and Cole and I were living there together as we were shooting. We remember it was that brownstone, and we all stayed there, and our friends from high school showed up with like a case of beer, like on a Tuesday night, because they associated movies with like, the only time they were around movies is if we had like a local premiere, and then it was a time to have like a big party.
Right.
They showed up and we were like, "No guys, we're making the movie, like you gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
Like we gotta sleep, we're getting up at 5 a.m.
Also, we were shooting in bars a bit, and so we were shooting in some bars that we used to hang out in.
Yeah.
And then it was just because you're shooting there, suddenly I remember staying up. They would just kept the bar open at the
At the Bow and Arrow?
The Bow and Arrow, yeah. It was a couple long nights. So it did have a party atmosphere. It's not really like that, quite the same, because there aren't as many people there.
There aren't as many people of our people there, for sure. And yeah, the Instigators was the first time I went back, and my brothers moved out. My mom wasn't in town. My dad's gone. So it was just you and me, and we were in a hotel. It was like I was shooting in an unfamiliar city almost. But it's beautiful. I mean, the city's...
It's a great place to work.
Yeah, it's a great place to work, but it was interesting going back and feeling a different relationship to it. Even our hometown is so different now. I was back a few years ago and went on a bike ride with my brother.
Cambridge?
Cambridge. We just biked all over, just past the old places, but even Dana Park, which they used to call Dog Shit Park, where we played basketball. I mean, it's all built up and landscaped, and you're like, wow, this place is really nice.
When I was graduating high school, or just before, they abolished rent control.
That was the Gooch. That was Chris Gallucci. That was he was in school with my brother, and he became the Gooch became the mayor. And
it was bad. It wasn't his fault. It was just because the people that wanted rent control abandoned, mostly MIT and other real estate owners, property owners. They gerrymandered finally, and the state voted to get rid of it statewide. And all of our parents were talking about that as an issue. And I didn't see any change for 10 years. And then suddenly they got all the tenants out that had been there for 4 or 5 generations.
There were also all the people in East Cambridge, the families, who had triple deckers in their family for a long time, and those guys made out well, so they wanted it too.
They wanted to sell
because they could sell and then get out and go buy something bigger somewhere.
But
else.
It's a shame. I mean, that happens. It's everywhere. It's just nothing's to stay the same. But it did very quickly change the whole face of the city. Yeah.
I think it's influenced our work in the sense that city, because we're from there, it makes the most sense to base stuff that we write there, and it's kind of our whole foundation as people. So it seems like the right place to return to work, because we kind of understand it and understand the people there, and the sense of humor and just the sense of life itself, the culture, the kind of attitude that you just feel when you're there.
Yeah, and if you want to be an actor or director or writer, storyteller, you want to be able to relate to, understand lots of different kinds of people. That was a really diverse, not every city was like that. There were people from all around the world. We would go to our public grammar school, and it had 2 different language programs for people who English wasn't their first language. I feel like growing up, we were exposed to different cultures a lot. And I don't know, the city sort of imparted values to us that we took forward. That when you run into people now, from Cambridge at that time, where we grew up, and there's a shared sensibility that I carry all of that stuff with me into work, into the way I think about the world and the performances that we do, and just the movies that you choose. You're conscious of things, it was a very conscientious place, I would say, thoughtful about sort of the work that was being made and its place in the world. And your mom was really well-traveled and an educator, and the whole city was such an academic city that you have a lot of the level of discourse just around you as a kid is pretty high, and it shaped us, didn't it?
For sure, yeah. No, that was well put. Man, well, there are so many memories, because we've done a lot of stuff together, though we hadn't worked together in a long time leading up to this one. But I mean, Manchester, yeah, but I wasn't on set as an actor. We haven't.
Oppenheimer, we didn't.
Yeah, Oppenheimer, we didn't have any scenes together. But I would probably say, of the memorable experiences we've had, making the movie Jerry, even the 3 Oceans movies, all that, the play that we did together in London, living in Soho and doing 8 shows a week with you, doing Jerry and moving from shooting in Argentina and we wrote that movie with Gus, with the director, the 3 of us every night sitting around having dinner, Gus just picking away at his guitar and just sitting there and talking about, all right, what are we going to do tomorrow? But then when we moved to Death Valley in July, which is the hottest place on earth, and we decided we were going to walk to set one day. And they were like, the park ranger was like, you cannot do that. And we were like, no, it's cool, because we're going to hydrate before we walk. And it's like 4 miles, and the crew vans are going back and forth, and we're only staying on the main road. Yeah. And they were like,
we were getting in character to be dehydrated
and be tired by the time we got to set. That was where I learned to put my shirt around my head, which kept my moisture in. And you hit the wall of just dehydration, because they said that out there, a healthy human being who's fully hydrated in July in Death Valley has 4 hours of life.
And I was smoking and drinking a cup of coffee.
If you don't get shelter and hydration, you have 4 hours to live. And we walked, and you just tipped over. And it was the craziest thing, where we thought that we had a walkie-talkie. We said, hey, they said, we're going to shoot. And we said, okay, come pick us up. And we stood by the side of the road because it was too hot to sit. And you started to talk.
I was hallucinating.
You were hallucinating, and you were saying, and I was like, you got to get the van up here really quick.
I thought you were trying to kill me.
Did you?
I thought that you had pretended to call the van. And that you and that I was dying and you wanted me to die, and you had pretended to call the van. I was like, there's no van coming. I bet he didn't actually push the button. He's not calling the van.
Oh my God.
And the world was going like, getting smaller, you know what I mean, closing in.
And how fast it happened. We were
walking. It was like a city block.
Yeah, having a totally normal conversation. And then you started, and I could tell, I didn't know like what you were seeing or hallucinating, but I didn't know that you thought I was gonna kill you. You just were, your sentences were incoherent. Like you were speaking English words, but not in the right order. And so I was like, this dude is fucked up. Like, we need help. And then they came, and that medic we had, he was like, I'm just gonna put a line in your arm, and you really didn't want to get an IV.
That guy put an IV in me when we went to the hotel, and the bag, and then he was like, look, you seem good. And he bounced and left me in the hotel room, like, and the IV, and then the IV fell back behind the bed. So my blood starts going out. My blood is leaving me down into the bag. And I was like, Hank, or whatever. You know what I mean? Finally, he came back in. I got my blood and my hydration. That's a good memory.
That's a good memory.
Do you remember when Morgan Freeman is he's talking to the panel in Shawshank? And he's trying to, they say like, what would you say to that young kid now? Yeah. And he's like, what did I tell him? We're not going to do better than that. I would give a lot of advice to my younger self, but I'm going to keep that between me and my younger self. But what would they think of us?
Yeah, what would they think of us?
They might be proud. I don't know. They'd be like, yo, you got old and ugly. It's probably what they would say to us.
You guys got fucking old. Yeah. But I remember doing Field of Dreams with your brother as an extra. And Kevin Costner coming out in between setups. There were like 3,000 of us in Fenway Park playing the crowd. And he came out and hung out with everybody. And I remember how much I fucking idolized that guy. I had an Untouchables poster on my wall. De Niro had come back to play Al Capone. And it was like, he was like the lead in all these big Hollywood movies. I'd go see it, and he just came out and like chilled with everybody and talked to everybody. And he was so nice. And I remember Ben and I just sitting there talking to him, just like thinking like, man, what a career. Can you imagine? What if we could have that career? And so, yeah, that kid would probably be really excited to know that we're still here and working in a business, like, especially growing up with like really good people. I mean, he used to babysit for David Mamet, you know what I mean? It's like you would hear these stories, not babysit David Mamet himself, but his children. And but you would hear stories from like Jan Eagleson and like people who, David Wheeler, and people who were really kind of luminaries in the business, and how hard it was and brutal, and we knew what we were signing up for. And I don't think we ever thought we would have careers that went for 30 years.
They would be pleasantly surprised to know that like they got to keep working into the future. But I think that what's interesting about that is that what I would want to say in return is like, it ain't all about that. You know what I mean? Like when you're younger, you're like, I just want to work. I hope I get to be in that movie. Just give me one shot of being in a big movie, a good script, a good thing, and you want it so badly. And then you get older, you have kids and stuff, and you kind of want to say to that younger self, like, there's so many other things to do in a life and to care about, and it's just not only about chasing that one thing. But
certainly not chasing a result, but the process of working hard on something that you love is something that even if it takes me away from my kids in small stretches, like I don't mind them seeing that, like a purpose-filled life, right? And that's whatever it is that they pursue. I hope they get as much joy out of it as
for sure.
we get out of this.
You the Marine?
Yeah.
You the ex-con?
Yeah, I did time, but you only gotta cast aspersions at me, guy.
I'm trying.
Good. Stop talking.
No alcohol detected.
What drew us to the Instigators? I can start by saying it was your script, so you should take it from here.
I really wanted to do a comedy. I wanted to do something that was like lighthearted and fun and commercial. I'd done a lot of movies that no one liked and no one had seen. And I thought, let me see if I can apply myself here. And, you know, people aren't like knocking on my door with The Hangover or whatever. I went and found a writer who I really like, who I know, and I said, can I read some of your scripts? Do you have I'm looking to do like a heist. Do you have any heists? And he had one that was very similar. But I wanted to do it with someone else. There were things about it that we had to change. So I started to work on it, and then brought it to Matt. I was hoping Matt would direct or act and direct or whatever, and you didn't want to do it. And but you wanted to act in it. And then we got Doug, and then Doug pulled in all these a great cast. Jack came prepared. Jack was such a baller. He's great in the movie, but it didn't need a lot of help. When he showed up, he was really prepared. He'd worked with a great coach, Lee Kilton Smith, and he just takes it really seriously.
I was shocked at how centered he was, not only as a person, but as an actor, like that thing, and as an artist. And so it translates through all of the work that he does. He's so present in a way that you can't teach. An actor I can think of who was like that when they were young was Cole. Cole Hauser was like that. I worked with him when he was like 16 on School Ties. And I remember Ben was in the movie too, and we drove away one night and we were like, that guy is he's got that thing, whatever it is. And Jack is like that. Like you go, man, it's up to him. It
makes you want to watch.
Yeah, if you cannot take your eyes off it, it's just incredibly, it's like a genuine, like a profound kind of presence.
Pissed me off.
Yeah, well.
He's upstaging.
But it'll be interesting to see what he does, because it's like, he can kind of do whatever he wants, whether he puts that energy into music or acting. It's like he can kind of go wherever he decides to go. And then we had the list of actors in this movie. I mean,
Toby Jones, Molina, Ving Rhames, Ron Perlman. I was saying that every one of them is in one movie that I had loved. You know
Paul Walter Hauser.
Paul Walter Hauser, Blackbird. I had just seen him in Blackbird, and I was like, he's amazing. A Serious Man? Serious Man. Yeah, they're all like, there's at least one thing you point to and go like, wow, that was incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible, yeah. And we were like, and I think that's Doug again, because his movies are so good that actors, they could see the world that you'd kind of built out. And they were like, all right, these roles are small, but they're really kind of colorful. Like this is gonna be fun. And everybody came and did that. And it's a really fun movie because of it, and really kind of dense and rich with like some really good performances. So Doug came in because we were talking about who would be the right person to direct it. And I just kind of went through my mental Rolodex, and he was just the obvious choice for something like this. Like his movies are so fun and so funny and tonally just always on point, and the tone is always really unique. And like I just showed my kids Go recently, showed them Swingers recently. Like it's just, they really hold up. And
he was the dream. He was the first person that we asked. And he didn't say yeah right away.
The script needed work, like as he said to you, which was disheartening. It needs an entirely new third act.
He's always juggling 10 things. He was finishing Roadhouse. So it's kind of a miracle how quickly he got into it, because we were making this movie while he was still finishing
posting Roadhouse, yeah. Yeah, if he likes the idea, if it lights a fire in him, he's all over it. And so it was a whole process too of like getting, because I've worked with him before, and Doug likes to take the engine all the way apart and put it back together again. So we just wanted to make sure to do that before we got on set. Yeah. So, and we had all that time, so we took 3 or 4 months, and it was like you were coming in with Chuck, and we were all just sitting in a room and trying to put together exactly what we were going to do, so that we could go to work with like a game plan, but also deviate from it and have fun and leave ourselves open to whatever was going to happen. Also be efficient, because it's artist equity and we're responsible for all the overages, and Doug and we put our salaries up to be responsible also for the overages. So we wanted to make sure we were thinking about everything before we started lighting money on fire.
But that's said that the hardest part is that first draft, getting the first draft, and Chuck did a bang. He's a very good writer, and he has got good ideas. And
he was really helpful when we were in that last stage before shooting, where we were reworking scenes and moving scenes around and trying to figure stuff out. He came in for weeks, and we sat in a room together and figured it out.
Wait, nobody multitasks like Doug, huh? I was thinking, like, what makes him so good is that he's really smart and really decisive and really flexible. And I decided those are the three things. But like multitasking, being able to do all, which is part of the reason I'll never fly with him. Because I don't think I could handle it if he was like.
He told me 20 years ago that because
else.
I said that to him 20 years ago. Cause he's a pilot. I was like, I wouldn't fly with you. And he goes, no, my personality totally changes when he goes, it's checklists, it's it.
I want to see proof.
Well, I mean, he flies all over the place and he's still here, so that's the proof. That multitasking part of directing, Steven Soderbergh once described it as directing, which I thought was such a cool way to describe it, as making a mural, a mosaic that's a block and a half long from an inch and a half away. Mm-hmm. And everything, you have to keep this entire picture in your head, but you have to care about every tiny detail on every little piece of the mosaic that you're making while you're making it, but not get lost in one of those details and not serve the big thing. It's, I thought, a really good way to describe it. And then Doug does it really well. Did you ever get any advice when you were younger that in retrospect was really helpful for you?
Oh man, I definitely have.
Not all the bad advice we gave you. Some really helpful advice.
A lot. Being on the spot, I know later I'm going to remember and go, wow, that was the thing I really meant the most to me. But right now, the stuff that's coming to mind, two things. I used to ask my kids when I couldn't decide if I was going to take a movie. And to me, like the decision to whether you're going to be a part of something, obviously is kind of the most important, because you want to be able to completely trust that situation and be totally reckless, to know that it's a good environment where you can make mistakes, you can make choices that are way too big or too small. You want to take big swings and know that like the script is sound, the director has a good eye, that it's going to work. You want to be risky, take chances in your performance. And so I would ask my kids sometimes, if I would say like, you think I should do this? And they almost always gave me really clear advice, and they would just usually distill it to like, well, what are you going to do? Sometimes those sorts of questions would be like, bring me back to, am I excited about the performance? I'm not thinking about the director or the script, other things. Am I excited about the job that I have in front of me? Are the choices like, does this character something, when I think about what am I going to be doing in that performance, the ideas start to come to mind. The simplicity of their thought process just brought me back to the re-anchoring.
The elemental questions.
The other was that one time, Don Cheadle just gave advice that which you'll remember, when he said, these movies are so big.
Oh, I'll never forget that.
There's so many people and so expensive, and everything moves so slowly. And people will they'll move on. You've done a scene and they'll go, okay, we're moving on. And you see 200 people start to move. And every second costs a fortune. But to have the courage to say, to him, he was calling it a dinosaur, this huge, slow-moving, heavy thing. And he would say, just say, dinosaur, stop. To stop it and to have the courage to say, we have to do something different, or we can do something better. And when you're young, it's just too intimidating to do that, to turn to some great director and go, no, wait. But I wanted to be able to do that. And I would try, and I usually found that they would be receptive. That, like, people go, oh, I'm sorry, what do you want? Is there something else you want to do? Because everybody actually wants to make the movie as good as it can be, and if there's a good idea, they're going to respond to it. What was the best advice that you ever got?
Well, it goes back to Jerry Specka, to our high school teacher. I'll never forget his 5 words. He said, just do your work, kid. Yeah. And the meaning that's taken on for me, like the older I get, it's actually very kind of stoic to just say, you can't control anything else but the work that you do. Like, do your work. Don't get caught up in anything else. Like, that has got to be your focus.
He's the Bill Belichick of high school acting teachers.
Yeah. If you think of who came out of that program, you, Ben, me, Max Casella, Matty Mayer, like, I mean, it's incredible how many people, and it's how many kids who didn't become actors.
Sean Hayter
came out of that. And who didn't become actors, but like took so much out of that project. It was just like life advice.
A great teacher.
Yeah. By the way, I did try to make the dinosaur stop the first time I worked with Clint Eastwood. I asked him, I did one take, and he was like, all right, check the gate. And I was like, wait, you don't think we should do one more? And he goes, why? You want to waste everyone's time?
Keep going, dinosaur.
Dinosaur, keep going. It's cool.